Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. We are here with Jael O'Hare for our Gender and Astrology episode. What's up, Jael?
Hello, hello. I thought that we could talk a little bit about this gender controversy in the Olympics situation, since
You tell.
it's topical.
Yeah, no, they say you're supposed to stay relevant.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's good. Um, so there's a couple elements to this, and one of them is sort of I wanted to start by touching on something that we talked about last time, which is sort of like exploring a little bit the nature of gender and from a philosophical astrological sense, and then kind of like looking at this boxer.
Do you want to tell us the
I've
story? Because I don't even
yeah.
know what.
I've heard her name pronounced a few different ways, so sorry if I'm saying it the wrong way, but it's Imane Khelif or maybe Imane, I don't know. But she is a boxer who sort of, there was a big controversy when she had a bout with this Italian, and she's from Algeria, and then she fought this Italian boxer, and she got a knockout or a technical knockout in the first round. Basically, she punched the other boxer so hard in the face that her nose started bleeding, and the other boxer like forfeited the match and kind of dropped her knees and started crying. And a lot of people who are really excited to be transphobic jumped on that situation and were like, a man is beating a woman to death in the ring and all this stuff. And then, of course, the other side got all excited about it and defended, and everybody was sort of fighting about whether or not this boxer is really a woman or is secretly a man and all this kind of stuff. So her father released her birth certificate, which showed that she was assigned female at birth. But also, luckily for us as astrologers, the birth certificate means we could do a chart. Although the birth time was 3 a.m. flat, and I think most of us know when a birth time is exactly on the hour. It's probably kind of a fudge. It also didn't specify AM or PM, although, again, from my perspective, given the context, it would probably be a 24-hour clock number if it was 3 p.m. as opposed to 3 a.m. So the chart that we're going to look at has a questionable time for those reasons, although I think for our purposes, it's good enough to just pretend like it is what it is. And we're mostly not going to be looking at houses anyway. So, I mean,
I
a little
think
bit, but
when we don't have the birth time, it's important to look at what do we know that we know. We know the signs. We the moon might waffle, 6 degrees either way. So we'll have to keep that into account. And you're right, we won't look at houses, but we can still know that we know a lot of things about the chart.
right. And if I were doing a reading for the person, I would definitely take the houses with even more of a grain of salt. Although I think for our purposes, it might be interesting to just consider that, look at that a little bit, just so that we can do the job that we're trying to do, which is demonstrate how one would look at gender in a chart and sort of analyze a chart. So that I think could be useful. But big disclaimer: this is not like the truth from on high.
Now, was
Um,
this the story that Sam Reynolds posted to his page?
I don't. Yes, I mean, I believe you. I don't
No, I
remember.
don't know.
Sorry.
He posted something, and you and I were both commenting on it, and I didn't know if this was
Yes.
where that was. I didn't read what he
Yeah.
posted. I was just asking him if he wanted
Totally.
to be on our show.
At this point, I only remember that we talked about talking about it. I've been seeing it all over my social media, so it's hard to miss these days. It feels like.
Oh, so it's a
But
thing.
yeah.
It's a thing. Okay, okay,
Oh
gotcha.
yeah, it's the whole thing. Well, I mean, policing the gender of women at the Olympics is a time-honored tradition at this point. So because people have such strong feelings about whether or not trans women should be in sports, scrutiny on women in general is high. And that actually is sort of a perfect lead into what I wanted to talk about, philosophically speaking, about gender. Because remember last time I was talking about how, you know, like Aries is the most masculine sign, and you know, if you add up the points that the, you know, in the way that we were talking about before with like the points assigned to the element, the mode, and the ruler, with Aries you get a 100% fully masculine sign. But when it comes to Taurus in Venus and the things that represent sort of the most feminine, you can't ever be 100% feminine. And the reason for that is, we have a page here. So if this is, it's blank. Okay, there we go. Ooh, interesting things happening. Okay, so this is a human before any differentiation. This is just human being, no gender. So everybody starts out as female.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And I think this is interesting, right? Because I think there's an assumption when we think of male and female as categories, it's like that they're sort of equal things that exist on the same level equally, like 50% that or 50% that or something like that. But what's really sort of happening, or a way to think about it, and kind of going back to that philosophy of numbers thing, the female, or the like everything together, would be sort of a 0. And then to get male, the way that a male is that it actually is derived from the female thing. So it's sort of like, the point of drawing this is that what I mean to say is like, and then this would be sort of a 1. So the male can be entirely itself because it's contained within itself, but the female contains the male within it.
Okay.
And then,
oh my God, I almost made it the worst joke, but I refrained.
No, you know, it's like that.
Should I make the worst joke ever?
I mean, I would love it. I love bad jokes.
I was like, I've had it. No, I can't say that. Never mind.
I love it. So, okay. So then when we start with this 0-ness, which is like the undifferentiatedness that is also female, and then the first split is male as a distinguishing thing. So that would be like a 1. But then in relationship to that, the female also becomes a 1/2 because it's relational, and again, it contains the other, whereas the male can remain by itself, you know, which, as a little bit of a side note, I think is an interesting thing when you think about gender dynamics some way, and like the archetype of masculine energy, because the archetype of masculine energy is like individualist. It's not relational. It's me. What do you mean other people? There is no other people. It's just me. Whereas the feminine archetype is inherently relational and is inherently like in relation to another thing, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that also leads to the other thing about this situation, particularly because I've been trying to understand like what the biological science of this situation is, because I am uncomfortable and unsatisfied by the sort of current dominant paradigm in transactivism, which is that gender is completely made up. You can just say what it is whenever you want, and that's all you need to know. And everyone should just chill, and like, because gender's just like totally made up. Or in sex also is completely just like a construct. And I mean, again, in a way, I agree with that. In the same way that like gravity is a construct, and the government is a construct, and money is a, you know what I mean? Like, okay, sure. Yeah. But like, you have to have that understanding and not have it just, I don't know. I personally think there are a lot of problems that I can't even get into right now about going on the full, like, say whatever you want.
Well,
side.
that seems to be more two of the nihilist thing that you were talking about with the
Yeah.
Neptune, Uranus, and Capricorn generation, where they're like tear it all down. There is nothing. Nothing is nothing. So it feels like that's a little bit too nothing is nothing. Everything is nothing for you. Whereas you like to start with that binary, and I liked how you added the two and everything. That was like using the binary and a kind of, Anyway, okay. So I'm hearing,
Yeah.
yeah. And I really like
Right.
how you upgraded your camera and you had your Sharpie. Like I think I'm really enjoying the show today.
Oh, good. Oh, good. So yeah, and the thing is, I understand that people, like a lot of anti-trans activists, um, really harp on biology and saying like things are so simple, people just are this or and they're not, and da da da, and in a way that also quickly gets paired with conservative right wing ideology that is like women should stay in the kitchen and women should be like this and men are like this and they should whatever.
It's like
But
cancer
my
should, it's like cancer should stay in the kitchen. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I mean,
See, that's actually
she's cooking, you know. But I guess from my perspective, my thought is, why can't we just say what's true and be learning about and curious about and accepting of what is true instead of needing to essentially do this like obfuscation, which is what I feel like the current ideology is doing. A like, we can't know anything, what is that? And that's not actually what does my understanding of the science from all the different political viewpoints that I have taken in scientific information from. It's like kind of like the left-wing people really emphasize how diverse the expressions can be, which is true, and the right-wing side emphasizes that the more you drill down, you can always essentially put somebody in one or the other category, which again, from a scientific perspective, I also agree with. But the thing I don't agree with is if so, like, oh wait, I lost my thing. So, like, when we go back to this idea, right? It's because in order to be male at all, you have to like do the differentiation thing. So there are ways to say that someone is male, and okay, so that goes to the second part, which is a
wait,
little
wait, can I
synopsis of how the thing works.
Can I speak
Yeah,
to this point? Okay. So I
yeah,
just want to like highlight this kind of cool point you just dropped on us, which is that you can look at gender from a more right-wing conservative perspective, or you can look at it from a liberal perspective. And what you just did there is open it up so we can say liberally that gender is all these things. It's anything you want it to be. That's a liberal perspective on gender. But like for example, we can apply this to our podcast right now. We could be like, well, obviously I'm the dude and you're the lady. No, I'm just kidding. See how there's something wrong there. Like obviously I'm the lady and you're the dude. I mean,
yeah,
that's a Republican conservativist perspective of you and I in our genders, right? Like, but you
right,
can distill it down to that is like I'm a femme and you're a mask. Like that's just
yeah,
if we just look at it like it's kind of obvi.
right,
But we could take a liberalist perspective and be like, but though we're both actually mutable and we are and we have like we could and I feel like the astrology is this more liberal encompassing multi-manifold perspective where we could like well we're both Pisces so we both are a little watery and we have some yin energy and like see how now I'm adding more layers to it but like I love what you just dropped on us. That's really cool to be able to dance liberally and conservatively on gender. Like that actually frees
hmm,
me up to be like, oh, that frees me up to be both because I think I just did both and I feel comfortable with both. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm comfortable with the binary of you and I being 0, 1. That's I don't mind,
right,
right? But if one
yeah,
of us was struggling with our gender, maybe that binary conservative perspective wouldn't be so comfortable because it wouldn't be so clear. And
yeah,
in the case of this boxer, like taking the conservative approach might not be that comfortable because maybe there is something gray in there. We don't know, it's like, I don't know.
right. So right, exactly, and that's why. Oof, man, there's a lot there. Okay, well, let's talk about the boxer. So what I learned from both like shoot, I forget this. There was a woman, I'm forgetting her name now, who is a genetic microbiologist who I learned some things from. And then there's this other guy who's also a biologist named Robert Sapolsky, which probably I wouldn't be surprised if some of us know about. He did the book like Why Zebras Don't Get Stressed and stuff. He's really interesting. I like this guy. But my basic understanding listening to these experts is that how sex happens is everybody starts with the potential XX or whatever, and then if you're gonna start going down the male path, you have Y somewhere. Now there is XX, XY, and I think as we maybe touched on before, there's like XXXY and XYY and X whatever.
Like
But either
Shaquille
way,
O'Neal is an XYY.
yeah, fascinating. I don't even know what that means, but it's really interesting.
Well, he's like a super
like,
male.
yeah, well, I was gonna say he's so huge. Yeah. But that's just chromosomally. So there is something that can happen where you are chromosomally male, but that's sort of where your maleness ends, because there's two other ingredients to be somebody who would have any sort of discernible male characteristics. So you got to have the X, you have to have a Y in there somewhere. And then you also have to have an organ that produces male gametes, meaning sperm, and male hormones like androgens.
Wait,
so
who says?
This is, they all say.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. This part is not particularly controversial. It's more what part people choose to emphasize that gets controversial. So you can actually have this is pretty rare, but there are some people who have like an ovary testes hybrid, which is why I say an organ and not just testes or ovaries. So like, yes, testes is definitely on the path, but if you also have like a hybrid organ and it produces sperm and androgen, and then the third part is you also have to have a pathway or receptors that can receive that. So what can happen is someone can be chromosomally male, but have no structures that are able to process or activate the androgens in their system to the level of a male person. So they're XY basically on paper, but they have like female appearing genitalia. If I don't have this wrong, I'm actually pretty sure there's some XY people who can even give birth. So it's like, right? Oh. But there's also some people who appear female in basically every way until they get older and they find out that they're essentially infertile, at least from a female perspective, but they could technically father a child with help if their like undescended testes are producing healthy sperm. So, whoa, pretty wild stuff.
Well, that was a very liberal view of chromosomes.
So the thing that I really hate to say about what I have learned in my own conclusion is that from the evidence that I have seen about the tests that this person had supposedly had and been published, it does seem like the boxer in question is chromosomally male and has had at least some male puberty or masculinization, which could mean that she has had an advantage over her female opponents. So
at punching people, an advantage at punching.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess I should say this part too. The reason male puberty is the thing that people care about in sports is because when you go through male puberty, your heart is bigger, your lungs are bigger, your tendons are stronger and more stretchy. You're like, I mean, yes, muscle mass and stuff, although that can change. That is a little more malleable in terms of like what hormone level you have. Like, for example, trans women who've been on HRT for a long time do lose some muscle mass.
Well, and there are reasons to be conservative about things, right? Because it's like if someone's gonna punch you in the face, you want to make sure that it's a fair fight. It's like don't be Shaquille O'Neal punching me in the face because I'm gonna die. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like
Right.
conservatively, that's not safe. Like that,
Right.
wear your seatbelt. You know, it's like there's a reason to take a conservative approach, right? And so
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
so. Does this woman identify as trans, or is she
No.
just?
So this is what's messed up is that she's from this extremely like conservative country, and I would imagine from her perspective and from her family's perspective, she looked female when she was born, she was assigned female, she was raised as a girl, she's lived her whole life as a girl. And I mean, now when you do have DSD, which is the new word for intersex, meaning differences in sex development, there are going to be some like noticeable differences. But again, when you come from like a super conservative country, like how much are people knowing or paying a lot of attention to sex differences like that? Like it's just I imagine in a super conservative place, you just are a woman or a man, and like there's no in between. And so I am amenable to the complexity. Like for me, just saying the science says this is like not the whole story the way that some people want to make it the whole story, because I don't feel like I know what the answer is, but like it is more complicated, and I don't know, like I am very hesitant to be like, yeah, let's just start constantly doing rigorous tests on all female athletes, and like because this wouldn't be necessary for men. Like this wouldn't.
Well, it would be if you had a female in the ring, and so it made it not a fair fight again. Like maybe the male boxer kept punching the other boxer, and he like went down and got hurt every time. That would be and then we tested him, and we were like, oh, he's XX chromosomally, so that's why he keeps going down. And like, but I mean, but the male boxer's not going to get hurt from the XX chromosome boxer. Like, so I think we take the conservative approach for safety reasons often. I mean, I think having men in female athletics is a safety concern.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I
But
well, and I would
it
also
would be
say
same as if I was
having.
trying to get pregnant, right? If I was trying to get pregnant, I would need a male to get pregnant with or a sperm to get pregnant with. So like I would need to take the conservative approach and be like, I need a man with sperm, right? Like
Right.
there are times where I don't know, you're teaching me this today, so I'm just building on what I learned today. That the conservative approach is actually necessary or makes sense. And in this
Mhm.
I mean, but I agree with you. It's like we don't want to start testing all female athletes right away. I mean, because well, if you're DSD, then you're not really male or female. You're both. I mean,
Well, so I mean, and again, this is where people can take liberties. I would say that at least from my understanding of the science of it, you either are male and then develop characteristics that make you appear female, or you're female and you have some characteristics that make you look male. But like to your example about like say chromosomally female person in a male space, it doesn't, like the way that DSD works, it's there aren't really female people who appear male so much at birth that they would be mistaken for male, but the opposite is true, if that makes
oh,
sense.
interesting.
So like but you can have a female person with like super high testosterone. So like when we get into like outside of the like intersex slash DSD conversation and talk about trans people, like of both of either in all genders, it is possible to be like have the reproductive system that could be classed as one sex, but then have so many characteristics of the other sex that like it may like, because I do actually think that that's sort of like where transness comes from. I mean, I
Well,
will
speaking
again also controversially say that there's a form of transness that has arisen more recently that is more political, but in terms of like traditionally speaking, people who ever since they were a kid are just like, I don't know, the things that I resonate with seem to be the things that are of the opposite gender. Like I think that is born out of uh, a biological circumstance.
Well, you know what's interesting is one I remember looking up this. There's this one boxer. I don't remember her name, but she's really like a world class boxer, and she is the astro twin of one of my best friends, who's a world class drummer, who's XX female, but is a world class drummer. Sun Mars conjunction in Sagittarius in both charts, and like when you talk about
Wow.
hyper masculine or hyper testosterone, it's that Mars in Sag is a hot Mars. It's a high testosterone Mars, and then being
Oh
conjunct
yeah,
the Sun in Sag, which is a masculine sign. So that's a super masculine, martial, high testosterone chart. And I've seen that in both those
exactly.
females.
Yeah, and Iman or Iman. Sorry, I don't know. Whatever. I'm just gonna start
Sure,
calling her the
sure.
boxer because I don't want to keep butchering her name. So she has a Sun Mars opposition,
Oh, yeah. Mars in
and
Scorpio, which is super strong.
right, exactly. She has a super strong Mars, and like I mean, well, okay, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Hold on. I just wanted to finish my thought about the yeah, I guess what I was just to wrap up the sort of philosophical side, it's there are times where somebody could be XY, and I think that it would still be appropriate for them to sort of functionally be in all female categories, including in sports. But I think if somebody is having like the level of like androgens and other things that sort of pass a certain threshold, which honestly, now again, we haven't been genetically and like physically testing people rigorously on a widespread basis, so we don't really have the data for how common this stuff is, and like there's some, but it's whatever. And I think that there are like some really hard, complicated questions to ask about when to do testing and all of these other kind of things. Um, but like again, you hear me that I'm not calling this boxer a man. I think it's fucking rude to call her a man. She does not identify as being a man,
Yeah.
and I think like we can have like what I would like to see about both this DSD conversation and about trans people is like recognizing that somebody's gender identity can be a little bit like poetry, and like have it be something that is sort of like riffed on or made up or like whatever, because in a way we all do that like in a very specific way, and be respectful of like recognizing who a person is. Like I mean, before a lot of this stuff happened, plenty of people had no problem calling drag queens she when they're in drag, right? Like
Well, I have a story about this.
there's a lot of reasons to respect somebody's presentation, but I don't think that it's mutually exclusive with recognizing the fact that there are circumstances where biology does matter. And I don't like that certain trans activists are trying to act like it's so unknowable and complicated that it doesn't matter. And I think it does matter. And it's a very masculine male perspective to say that what female people need for protections doesn't matter.
Well, okay, so this is so astute. Like you are so smart. You're blowing my mind, actually. Because it's a matter of respect, to address the person as they identify and all these kind of things. But we could say that she is as strong as an XY person, and in that case, it might not perhaps be safe to put her in the ring with some XX, athletes or whatever. But we can still respect her as a she. It reminds me of this time 20 years ago. I was dating a trans guy, and when I was dating him, he was coming out basically. So he was just drawing down his vision of being male, but he's super male, and we're still best friends and everything like that. And but the thing is that I remember riffing on calling him who he was, like we had to make up new language together so I could respect who he was, like with certain body parts and things that were still there. Like I was riffing on, I'd be like, those pecs are nice, or like I was like riffing poetically to respect the vision that he had in his mind, and like that was totally possible even
Yeah,
with the conservative gender facts being present. Like I
right,
actually know exactly
right.
what you're saying, and I'm
Yeah,
not speaking confidentiality. That person would not be upset if I said that. But
Oh, totally.
I think this
Yeah,
is brilliant.
I just, the thing is that this idea of kind of doing the fiction and saying there is no difference between a trans woman and a cis woman and all this kind of stuff, like, to me, what the core of that is a non-acceptance of who trans and intersex or DSD having people are. And in my version of humanism and feminism, we love people for who they are, not need to pretend that they're like, it's so funny because the whole thing about this is like, it's destroyed the binary by saying there's no differences, but it enforces the binary. It's like a total
Well, and
mind
you're
fuck,
celebrating complexity. Like, I don't understand why everyone wants to take the conservative approach. Like, I mean, but you're teaching the world something that there's a conservative approach and a liberal approach. And it's like everyone keeps taking this conservative approach and being stymied by the complexity of gender. And it's like, oh, why would you be confused by something that has like 50 layers maybe? Like, it's also culturally where you've grown up. What's the culture that she grew up in? Like, did she grow up in a boxing gym or did she grow up in a flower shop? Like, that could have affected her gender. And like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
It's like, I think maximalism celebrates complexity and
right,
minimalism celebrates conservativeness. And like, we like people who are smarties, we're like, can we have the complex version, please? Can you stop giving me the milquetoast version?
right.
Like,
Yeah, right. So, I mean, essentially, and this is kind of like goes back to what I'm saying about the binary thing. It's like everyone is a complex, unique presentation that exists on a spectrum, but the spectrum does have a line in the middle. And if you need to make a determination based on a biological sex, you can add up what the things are that constitute biological sex and make a determination about whether or not that person falls on one side or the other of the line. And some people are close to the line, and there's reasons why it's complex. But again, like saying that like having testes that don't have a pathway to receive the androgen doesn't mean like the person still has testes, so they would be a male person biologically. What's fucked up is saying that if you're male biologically, that you can't be feminine or not have a lot of male secondary sex characters. You know what I mean? Like, that's the part that's fucked up. But like, there's no reason to not acknowledge what's there. And what I would love to see is celebrating the social gender of women who are biologically male or chromosomally male or whatever the situation is, and accepting that, but also saying like it's gonna depend on what the context is. Like if there's going to be a sex differentiation or even a gender differentiation, like let's make those based on what we need or like why the separation is happening, if that makes sense.
well,
Like if the separation is happening because of a sex characteristic, it should be based on that. If it's happening because of a social characteristic, like everybody who wants to wear pink, go over here. Well, yeah, we're not going to be like, let me see what's in your pants. No, like you're fat
well,
and you like
and I
pink,
think
go over there.
the why is the gender being questioned in the first place? In this case, it's a safety concern of like
Right.
it, and so it's like, there is a reason to kind of question the gender. So you have to look at like what, but it's like it makes me think too, like even like the cyclical fluctuating gender of astrology. It's like you can put people on one line or whatever, on one side. It's like, how astrologers trying to count up the elements in your chart. They're like, which is your strongest element, and they count them up and give them points, or they say like, which is your
Right.
strongest planet, and they count them up and give them points, and they assign. And I'm like, well, it's actually a cyclical fluctuating thing, because which planet is strongest depends on which transit's hitting it at which time. Like we can always go back to like this cyclical fluctuating thing too, and it's like but I mean, I think why is gender being analyzed is the first question of like, how should we or could we analyze it, and why? I mean, it
Right.
depends. Like if you're
Yeah.
analyzing somebody of like, would this be a good partner for me to make a baby with? It's like you might
Right.
need to analyze their gender to see like, can they make a baby? And if
Yeah.
they don't have any sperm, then maybe the two of you still can make a baby, but you have it in, you get a sperm donor and then you raise a, there's always a way.
Right.
And then okay, I know what I was thinking. So Ultimate Fighting, it makes me think of Ultimate Fighting, where you can
Right.
get like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy against like a sumo wrestler, and they put him in the ring, and they're like, "What's gonna happen now?" It's like I think the DSD person can still be a fighter and
Right.
compete legit. We might just need to put them in a ring with like a hodgepodge of complex
Right.
cases. Like instead of
Yeah.
like putting you in the Olympic, but then they're denied access to the Olympics, which is the biggest
Right.
games. So you see where it
Well,
becomes controversial?
okay. So here's the thing, though. People often come to that conclusion that like trans women or chromosomally male people who are female identified um, can't compete at all, but it's not true. They can compete in the male category.
Yeah, but it's not safe
Like,
for her. Maybe it might not be safe for her.
again, I don't know the answer to this specific question, but I feel like we could be working on ways to determine those things. And I don't know. Like, and also I feel like I have to disclaimer say, this is just the information that I have found on the internet about this person. I'm obviously not a doctor. I haven't personally examined her. I don't know about whatever.
Right.
So I'm just going on what I know.
Disclaimer
But like what
time.
you're saying, even about like different classes, like PCOS is an incredibly common condition in XX people that results sometimes in growing a beard or having like other very like strong secondary male sex characteristics, but they are not male people. So like, I mean, that's like PCOS is super common, especially well, maybe I just think that because I'm queer, because a lot of queers
Yeah.
have PCOS,
Yeah.
which
I've
is
seen a
I think
lot.
also interesting as a side note,
Yeah,
right? Like, but like, yeah, maybe if we did start, because my suspicion is if we actually were testing people chromosomally and otherwise as a regular thing, I think that we would find out that there are a lot more people who have DSD
yes.
things
A lot of it's
than
we
we
don't know because how
realize.
often do we get our chromosomes tested? Like Neversville, like ever.
Never.
Yeah.
Like unless you have like unless you're like in the Olympics or you're
Okay,
like
so the
having
astro radicalist in me is like, well, her chart is actually just a little too fierce for the female category. Like, if we go back to her chart, like,
right?
it's
Yeah,
not
let's look at her chart. Her chart is so ambiguous.
it's not just the Mars in Scorpio, but that she has the Moon in Scorpio, and then she has Jupiter and Aries trying Pluto and Saturn. Like, she's just kind of like that. Jupiter and Aries is conjunct Mercury would be like punching, like would be like super masculine also.
Yeah. So I have a. Do you mind if I just go through a list of Sun through Saturn about sign placement?
Sure.
So we have Sun, which is a masculine planet in a Taurus, Venus ruled sign. So there we have our first incongruence right there. We have like
That's more of a lady. That's a lady placement.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, it's like a balanced masculine energy of a planet in a feminine congruent. I'm going back to this idea that I had from my thing before with the idea of things being individual or congruent, meaning they're like of themselves, which would be like Aries, Venus, Taurus, Mars, like those guys. And then the balanced, which is separate but together, which is the sun and the moon. And then the bi-gender version of that is Saturn. And then there's the blended together planets, which is Jupiter, which is a little masculine, the north node in this case being the like little bit feminine blended together, and then the south node being the like the totally asexual one. But the other thing that's interesting about the nodes and Jupiter is that they are both like they're both, I don't know, I wish I would have written this in pen so you can see it, but they're expanders. So Jupiter rules both Pisces and Sagittarius. So they're both mutable signs. So that's like a bi-gender thing happening. And it's like in Pisces, it's it's amplifying, but like in a feminine polarity. And then in Sagittarius, it's amplifying in a masculine polarity. And then Mercury and Saturn are both like neutral, but Mercury does exchange and Saturn does contraction. So we have Jupiter out, Saturn in, Mercury exchange, and those are your like blendies. And then with the nodes, to quote your fave, Judith, we got power outage and power surge.
Okay.
So when we think about those principles and then like where they are in the chart, we have the sun, this like, integrated masculine planet in the feminine congruent sign of Taurus, and then moon. The moon is a big deal in this chart. 9th house. Oh, and the sun is in the 3rd house, which, I mean, again, we're not doing houses super hard, but that would be a sort of a bi-gender house, if you will. So is the 9th house, because, 9th house is associated with Sagittarius, and the moon is in fall in Scorpio. And
I'm going to have to take the conservative approach and say we can't use houses because we don't know the birth.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, again, that was just for fun, but not this person. If the birth time is right, though, her ascendant is within 1 degree of my ascendant. Just fun fact. I've also done a little boxing. It's just kind of a funny thing. But okay. So yeah, moon and fall in so obviously moon is like a big feminine planet, and then the feminine planet is in fall in a sign that, like, back to this chart when we were talking about, is in the most dynamic like polarized extreme masculine and feminine together sign, being Scorpio. And then the other two really gendered planets being Venus and Mars. Venus is in Gemini, which is a bi-gender ruled planet. So, and then Mars is in its domicile in Scorpio. So it's like we have all of these indications of the basically like the feminine aspects of her chart are in like mutable or like bi-gender kind of areas. And then there's like a lot of like the masculine part of her chart is a mix between strong masculine and kind of like a bi-gender mix. But just in general, she has just like a lot. I mean, even sun and moon are opposed. Like that's really interesting, especially when you think about above the horizon, below the horizon, and sort of having a like visibly male femaleness, you could say, and then a sort of hidden presentation of femaleness, like in the below in the sorry, that came out weird, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I have to show you something about the transit. So this is my commentary here. So this is really interesting with Pluto going over her Neptune and in Aquarius, and it's squaring her Mars. So like she's been training Pluto square Mars. She's training, that's like a martial Pluto, something, and Mars would be like on her athletic ability, and Mars is in Scorpio, so it's very strong. So it's been a hyper like martial few years for her, but now she's going into this Pluto Neptune in Aquarius, which is like everything gets confusing in the media and like in all that Hollywood effect, which is Neptune, and she's going to get famous through this, and like, but all that confusion about her masculinity is that Neptune square Mars, and that's, and so I do think, when we get like dysmorphias, often we get like a Neptune square something in the chart, like, where it's like my vision is not congruous with what people see. That's a Neptune square issue. And so I think it's just interesting to look at her chart with the transit that she's in, which is like, it's totally time for her to now be in the public eye, and like, and maybe she'll make great strides on gender something. I don't know. It's Aquarius right now, so that would be.
I mean, and also, if you like zoom out a little bit more, that's a T-square between
Yeah.
her Mars Sun opposition and also Saturn right there with her Sun squaring this Neptune, which, you know, again, I know we're not saying it, but it could be on her ascendant. But either way, in medical astrology, Neptune talks about the glands and the hormones and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, having that being square both Sun and Mars says something about like a DS that like feels like a DSD kind of interaction. And I will also second the Neptune square thing by saying that I have Neptune square Sun in my chart.
Oh, interesting, interesting. So I'm just looking at Judith Hill's medical astrology book. It says Neptune diffuses the energy of the body parts governing the sign by tenants. In cases of electromagnetic fatigue, let's see. Well, oh, he confuses and clouds any issue, making correct diagnosis problematic. I didn't really see anything about glands here, but I do, hormones, I
That
definitely
was from
think
this
are.
one.
Okay, cool, cool, interesting. Um, yeah,
I
so
mean,
I totally think that this is legit. Like Neptune squares make dysmorphias. As far as like my
yeah,
vision does it like I have dysmorphias. I have a Neptune square, a Moon square Neptune. Mine are not gender dysmorphias, but like I'll have a dysmorphia of like I see a vision that people don't see yet, and I'll be like, oh my God, this thing's happening. Like I have visions basically, and like
mm,
and I'll see the future in a vision, but it's because I'm about to
right,
make the future, if that makes sense. But like, yeah,
sure.
I do think like she's gonna make a new future perhaps for gender in general, and like yeah, I mean hopefully she sees our video and how brilliant it is.
I mean, I don't think she would like it because she actually, it was just, they just started talking about it today or yesterday that she's suing J.K. Rowling and some other famous turf person for cyberbullying her. Which, I mean, again, like, I know I said what I said about what I think about the science, but like I am not, that's the thing that I like, I feel so uncomfortable about sort of agreeing with the science that's being presented by certain people because they're using that to be extremely like they're just being horrible to people and like really sort of viciously attacking and cyberbullying people. And like I'm cool with that. Like that is not cool. Like I don't know. So
Well, I
I
mean, and
think
that's
these
where
things
the
are
conservative
complicated, but
approach, if you use a conservative approach when it's not really warranted, and like these conservatives, they do end up getting black and white and bullying people. And like I think conservative lenses are meant for conservative moment, like things like is this safe or not, but like is this a bad per like I mean, I don't know, and you gotta
right.
be cool. You just gotta be cool. I'm just looking at a picture of her. I've never even seen her. Is this her?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Okay, well, let's see. Controversy
So I
and glory. She looks kind of mask. Like I can see where she's like,
I think she's like 5'10". You know, but it's like even this, it's like I I don't know. One of the things that I've also kind of noticed about the approach and tone of trans activism, which in my opinion is like vastly majority shaped by trans women, um, is that there's like a really heavy emphasis on
oh, she's both.
science kind of, but then also philosophy. And it the one thing that it doesn't contain is a recognition of intuition and kind of rule of thumb type stuff, because the perspective is very like you can never know anyone's gender, don't try to think, always ask people's pronouns, we cannot know what someone's gender is. And I think that flies in the face of the fact that like I don't know. When we're walking around, like, really, do you really feel like that in your normal life? Like, if you ask your gut, really, when you're walking around in life, do you really feel like you can't know anyone's gender? I don't think that that's true. And that is, archetypically speaking, a sort of feminine principle to have the practicality of being like, yeah, but I can just kind of tell, though, you
Mm.
know?
Mhm.
And that actually goes back to another thing, which, I mean, that's complicated, but I'm going somewhere with this. Sorry,
Well,
what are you gonna say?
is there somewhere where we can assume gender unless a more complex lens is needed in that case? Like, you know, it would be like saying like red is red. You know, I can see red unless, and then we're like, wait, is that red or orange? Like, okay, we might
Mm-hmm.
have the word fuchsia, or like I don't know all the red terms, but like we might
Right.
need an artist in here to tell us exactly which red this is, or you know, it's like. Are there, and maybe we don't even need to know that red unless we're painting a monochromatic red painting with 20 reds in it, like, and we need to know which red is which, like is it
Right.
going to be
That's a
added
great
on an
example.
on needed basis, or you know?
Yes, I do think that. And I think the missing piece of this, which again is going back to my, like, by the way, I know this is like so controversial what I'm saying, but the, the feminine side of this analysis that doesn't exist beyond the intuition part is also, again, the relational part. Like, the masculine perspective is, all I need to be me is to say that I'm me, and y'all can fucking deal with it, you know. But like the feminine, archetypically feminine perspective of that is like, yeah, I am me, but also I am me in relationship to other people. And that is a thing, like, I don't, you know, and again, this, to me, everything I'm saying is about integration and balance, which is why I think in the first episode I called myself a meta modernist, because I'm not interested in picking a side. I'm interested in what is true when you balance them. So in this case, yes, you can have whatever poetry you want about your gender identity, but your ability to enforce that on other people is limited, you know? So basically, like, we get buy-ins either in, like, verbally, explicitly, or just by how we're presenting into our gender presentation by the things that we do, which means, like, when you present in a certain way, people have an idea about what your gender identity is. So for example, if I might be able to clock a trans man or a trans woman as a trans man or as a trans woman, but I can also clock that they're presenting in a certain way. And so, like, I don't hate trans people, and I am one. So, like, when I see how someone's presenting their style and gender, I happily and easily refer to them in the way that they're presenting. Now, non-binary people, and specifically people who are doing like gender fuck, you don't know my gender stuff, are throwing a monkey wrench in that social contract, which is also why I think a lot of people get mad about it. Um, because there are some people who are actually like happy to call trans people by their presented gender, but like get annoyed or mad about this sort of like gender fuckery
Well,
thing.
it's like this. What if I was like, this is red, I just want you to know this is red,
Exactly.
because I want it to be red, you know? And it's like people are like, when they're dressed like a total female and they're female presenting, they're like, my pronoun is he, and you're like, I'd be like, this,
Right.
because I say so. And if you call it green, I'm gonna be pissed at you. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but then I could say like, you know, this is kind of red to me. I kind of see this as red. See how
Right.
like that's a little bit more palatable of like it's
Yeah.
orange. You could be like, no, that's orange. I could be like, no, that's red. But
Right.
see how this is still within shared reality, and this is
Yep.
just like, fucking with you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think gender
Right.
is a similar way.
And here's the thing, it is your right to be non-binary and identify as whatever the hell you can live. I don't care, make up whatever you want. The thing that isn't your right is to, like, freak out on people and cause interpersonal conflict over the fact that you are upset that somebody else isn't adopting your worldview. So, like, there's a lot of context for people being into the idea of being non-binary. And if you have people in your life who want to use non-binary pronouns for you, or whatever, if you want to make up neo pronouns and you have people who will call you that, there is nothing wrong with that. But I think people also need to realize that on the larger scale of things, you don't actually have the right to tell somebody else what their understanding and conceptions of gender are and enforce that. And I'm also a little bit like, you're being a rebel. That's great. But guess what happens when you're a rebel? You're against the mainstream, and then people are like, you're bad, you're a rebel. So like, I feel like you kind of have to
Well,
accept like the
and
responsibility for that.
there are reasons for these boxes. Watch this. What if we were doing a community project where we're making a monochromatic red painting? And the project was everyone bring a color of red to the project, and we're going to make a monochromatic red painting.
Right.
If I brought this and I was like, well, this is my red crayon. And they're like,
Right.
well, why? And I'm like, because I say so. I say,
Yeah.
and so now this whole monochromatic red project is going to have a green in it because I said
Yeah.
so, but
Yeah.
I'm not even
Right.
trying to get along in the world. I'm just trying to be like some deconstructionist asshole, right? And it's like that people do that with gender too. And you're like, we're
Yeah.
trying to create boxes for a reason. We're trying to have men and women's
Yeah.
Olympics. We want women in the Olympics. We need to
Right.
know who can punch who, like whatever. It's like, this is
Exactly.
a painting
Exactly.
we're making. We're not trying to just do this for no reason. But no, if I
Right.
brought this to it and I'd be like, this is my red thing, they'd be like, well, that's not quite red, that's orange. You're like, oh, I'm sorry. To me, that looks red. To me, that looks red. Like,
Yeah.
and would I be a deconstructionist asshole, or would I just have a little bit of a different perception?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think, you know, see what the point I'm making is there are a reason for conservative views of things,
Right.
and
Yep.
people who want to just mess with everything. It's like, okay, if your chart messes with everything, you have a Sun Uranus conjunction square Mars, that's fine. Like, you're a
Right.
mess with everyone. You're going to mess with the monochromatic painting. You're going to mess with gender. You're
Yep.
going to mess with everything. But your job
Right.
is not to be liked. It's to be a fucking
Yep. Exactly.
your job is to piss people off. All right,
Right.
you
Right.
want it pissing us off, like.
Exactly. Exactly. And just because your job is to piss people off, again, it still doesn't mean you're still protected from the same amount of violence and discrimination that anyone is protected from. But it's not transphobia or violence or oppression if you go against the mainstream and people don't accept that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like because of the social contract and because of relationality. And what I have found is that, yeah, I mean, this is actually, again, this can still be true of non-binary people, but like my original understanding of non-binary people was, again, it was more in that gender poetry realm. And I respect that because I do know a lot of people whose presentation and sort of gender flavor is either very ambiguous or very polarized or whatever. And I love them for that. I do not hate non-binary people. I love you guys. I have so many non-binary friends. Like, it's not a hate thing. But my thing is more about like when we're getting into like legislation and we're trying to like arrest someone for a hate crime because they wouldn't call you they them at work.
Well, it's like if we were
Like,
making a painting, and we do have to close this, like, but if we were making a painting that
yeah,
was like a rainbow painting where you can bring whatever color you want, then
right,
then no one is pushing the rules, because
right,
the only rule is do whatever you do. Like, and in that
yeah,
case, all genders are beautiful, right? Like, so it's like,
yes,
you see how it's case dependent on
yeah.
whether or not what we do. And so this has been an amazing episode. I'm going to call it conservative and liberal approaches to gender, and the boxer's name, I think.
Great, sure. I love it.
Jael,
Yeah.
you're blowing
Okay.
my mind. You're blowing my mind.
Good. I'm glad. I hope that everyone doesn't hate me after this, but if they do, it's fine because it's my job to be unpopular, and
Your
I accept
Mars
that.
Uranus is not afraid. And they don't hate you. I bet they're falling in love with you one episode at a time, because that's what I bet you they are.
Yeah.
Right.
I love everybody in the homo rainbow, and I also want people to learn how to really fully see and accept themselves in all of their complexity and love themselves in all of their complexity, because I think if we're able to love and accept ourselves, that is going to be the thing that opens the door to more people loving and accepting us for how we are, and I don't think that we need any obfuscations on top of that.
Nice. Well, that's a good ending. All right, everyone. Have a good week. Bye-bye.